I've been studying near-death experience for almost 50 years now. I didn't start off to do that. I was raised in a materialistic scientific household where I assumed the mind was created by the brain, and I never gave any thought to anything spiritual or religious. And when I went through college and medical school, I had that mindset that everything we think and feel is created by the brain. And then in my early days as a psychiatrist, I was confronted by patients who claimed that they had died or almost died, and during that time when they were clearly unconscious had left their bodies and could describe for me things that happened at other locations outside the body, and they described them accurately. And I couldn't make any sense of that. It's tricky to look at the relationship between mind and brain because in everyday life it seems like mind and brain are the same things. When you have too much to drink, you get intoxicated, that affects your thinking. Or when you have a stroke or something going wrong with your brain, that affects your thinking. So it seems as if your thoughts are created by the brain. But there are exceptional circumstances where the brain seems to be slowing down or stopping, and the mind seems to be flourishing, in fact, better than ever. So one model that's been proposed is that the brain does not create thoughts, but receives them from outside and filters them.
What exactly happens when we die? It is a question as old as humankind, and one without a final answer. For some, death is an absolute ending. For others, it is a passage into another form of existence. Yet over the past 50 years, something unexpected has challenged that boundary. Thousands who nearly died, or were declared clinically dead, report that they experienced something more, something inexplicable, profound, and above all, real. Near-death experiences are neither marginal nor esoteric. It is estimated that about 5% of the general population have lived through one. Among critically ill patients, the figure may reach between 15 and 20%. We are speaking of millions worldwide who say they left their bodies, traveled through tunnels of light, felt a peace beyond words, or encountered deceased loved ones. People of all ages, cultures, and beliefs describing strikingly similar events, with a clarity and conviction that are hard to dismiss. For a long time, such accounts were pushed to the margins of folklore or spirituality. Today, more scientists are willing to look carefully at what used to be whispered among them. One name stands out as a pioneer: Dr. Bruce Greyson. Trained as a psychiatrist, Greyson never imagined he would devote his career to so controversial a subject. He grew up in a scientific household where the spiritual had no place. I was a skeptic, he says. I was raised in a materialist environment, but facts do not vanish simply because they challenge our beliefs. In the 1970s, a single clinical encounter altered his course, and with it, the course of modern research into near-death experiences. Since then, he has collected and analyzed thousands of cases, many backed by verifiable medical documentation. Greyson did not merely record what people said. He searched for patterns, classified features, checked dates, and compared witness accounts with medical charts. His clinical, methodical approach helped transform a set of subjective anecdotes into an emerging field of study. His book, After, a doctor explores what near-death experiences reveal about life and beyond, is now among the most influential works on the subject. A question remains: how can people from different countries and cultures describe phenomena so alike? An overwhelming light, a sense of boundless peace, a feeling of unity with all that exists, and even a panoramic review of one's life, as though a film were projected in an instant. Many of these experiences occur when there is no measurable brain activity. From a medical point of view, such people should not be conscious, much less able to retain detailed memories. There is another unsettling note. A large portion of those who pass through these episodes return convinced that something lies beyond death, They do not speak as converts to a new belief. They speak with the assurance of those who say they have been there. Many insist that what they lived through felt more real than anything they had experienced before. More real than real, as Greyson often reports participants saying. Science is divided. Some propose that these phenomena are hallucinations triggered by low oxygen, neurochemical storms, or the release of substances such as dimethyltryptamine. Other researchers, including Greyson, argue that these explanations do not fully account for the richness and consistency of the testimonies. Something more seems to be occurring, or at least more than current models can comfortably contain. The philosopher C.S. Lewis once wrote, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world." Perhaps the very existence of that longing points towards a reality beyond what we can touch. Greyson does not offer final answers. His aim is to open the conversation, to bring data, and, above all, to listen. To listen with rigor and with an open mind. For him, these experiences are not conclusive proof of an afterlife, but they are a window onto something we do not yet fully understand. In this opening chapter, we have only brushed the surface of a deeper mystery. We have crossed a threshold. From here, we begin a journey into the unknown, guided by science, by consciousness, and by the voices of those who returned. Perhaps death is not the end. Perhaps, as thousands of witnesses have been telling us for decades, it is the beginning of something we are not yet ready to comprehend. And yet, as we shall see, it has already begun to reveal itself. Caution matters. Careful scholarship is not the enemy of wonder. It is the ally of truth. Greyson keeps returning to the cases, to the medical records, to the patterns that recur across cultures. Leaving the body, the tunnel, and the light, encounters with the departed, the panoramic life review, the decision or compulsion to return. Again and again, the same features emerge in accounts gathered independently, often from people with no prior interest in the subject. It is this coherence, as much as the emotion of the stories, that has kept him at the work for nearly 5 decades. There is also the matter of aftermath. People frequently change after such episodes. Priorities shift. The fear of death diminishes. Empathy grows. We will return to that. For now, we stay with the threshold moment, the instant when the measurable seems to falter and something else surges into view. If there is a thread to carry forward, it is this. Honest inquiry refuses to ignore data. Whether those data ultimately fit a neurological explanation or invite a broader framework, Greyson asks us to look, to listen, to test, and to keep our minds and perhaps our hearts open as the evidence accumulates. What does it feel like to die? The question is as old as fear itself. In recent years, though, answers have come from an unexpected source. People who returned men and women, the elderly and children, declared clinically dead or brought to the brink, who came back with memories as vivid as they are unsettling. What they describe is not muddled like a dream, quite the opposite. Near-death experiences show a striking inner structure. At the most critical moment, many report a total, indescribable peace, no pain, no fear, only calm. Then comes a sensation of slipping free of the body, as if floating above it, watching from the ceiling while clinicians hurry, relatives weep, and distant voices blur around a failing pulse. After this separation, many speak of moving through a dark tunnel towards an intense, non-blinding light. The light does not merely illuminate, it conveys love. There, some meet the departed, parents, grandparents, a friend gone without warning. Others encounter a presence that has no form, yet radiates unmistakable wisdom and compassion. Dr. Bruce Greyson, a psychiatrist and a leading investigator of the phenomenon, has gathered hundreds of such accounts. The surprise is not only what people say, but how they say it. They don't describe it as dreamlike, he notes. They describe it as more real than life itself. Among the most striking features is the panoramic life review. Suddenly, one's entire existence appears, not as a dry recollection, but as an emotional reality. Every gesture, every word, every choice. And not merely from one's own vantage point. People report feeling how their actions affected others. It wasn't a judgment, said a woman resuscitated after an accident. It was a lesson. What fascinates researchers is that these descriptions recur with similar details across ages, cultures, and beliefs. Even among those with no religious background, a convinced atheist, a small child, a devout believer, all converge on the same core elements: peace, separation from the body, tunnel, light, love, life review. The pattern looks transversal, almost universal. From his scientific vantage point, Greyson does not claim to define an afterlife. He does insist, however, that these reports resist reduction to simple hallucinations. Their constancy and coherence warrant rigorous study. As he puts it, "When someone tells me it was just a dream, I ask, has a dream ever changed your life forever?" Another recurrent theme is transformation. Those who pass through a near-death experience rarely return unchanged. Many lose their fear of dying. Some change career, loosen their grip on material pursuits, and become more compassionate and spiritually oriented, though not necessarily religious. It is as if they had glimpsed something beyond the familiar map of reality and could no longer ignore it. Neuroscience has tried to account for these events. One proposal is hypoxia, a lack of oxygen to the brain. Another points to a surge of neurochemicals, including dimethyltryptamine, at the threshold of death. Yet recent studies have unsettled these tidy explanations. A notable project at the University of Padua compared memories of near-death experiences with memories of real events and with imagined episodes. The result surprised the authors. Near-death memories scored as richer, more complex, and more detailed than any other type. "We analyzed them using mnemonic parameters," they reported, and found they were even more structured than memories of real-world facts. This echoes the stance of cardiologist Pim van Lommel, who has argued for years. These experiences cannot be dismissed as delusions. They are not caused by drugs, nor by trauma, nor by hypoxia. They are unique phenomena with their own characteristics. One may debate interpretations, but the data resist being brushed aside. Science does not yet hold all the answers, but one point is clear. What people report at the lip of death is not easily ignored or minimized. These are not confused dreams or wishful fantasies. They are profound accounts that reshape how the experiencer understands life and death. Philosophy has entered the conversation. In Why an Afterlife Obviously Exists, Jens Ambers contends that the intensity and coherence of such testimonies amount to a kind of empirical evidence from lived experience, that should be weighed accordingly. From that perspective, the question shifts. It is no longer whether such events occur, but why so many people, under extreme conditions, undergo the same distinctive sequence. Greyson's stance remains careful. Acknowledge the testimony, examine medical records, test hypotheses, and resist premature closure. He neither preaches nor speculates. He listens with scientific discipline. Across interviews and clinical notes, familiar motifs recur: the peace, the vantage point near the ceiling after separating from the body, the tunnel and the light that feels like love, the meeting with the departed and the presence that guides without coercion, the life review that teaches rather than condemns, the choice or the sending back, and later the after effects, less fear, more empathy, new priorities. The same constellation appears again and again, even among people who had never heard of near-death experiences before their own. None of this closes the debate. It opens it. The evidence can be approached through neurology, psychology, philosophy, and the human search for meaning. What matters, Greyson argues, is to keep the inquiry honest, follow the data wherever they lead, be precise about what is known and what is not, and attend to the lived consequences, because lives really do change. Perhaps that is the most immediate lesson these accounts offer the living. They invite us to weigh our words and actions, since, as many report, we may feel them again through the hearts of others, and to live in a way that would stand the scrutiny of such a review. Whether one interprets these episodes as brain events or as windows onto a wider reality, their impact is undeniable. For now, we attend to the pattern, the voices, and the careful work of researchers like Dr. Bruce Greyson. The journey continues, not into fantasy, but into evidence examined with an open mind and a steady hand. Dr. Bruce Greyson was not raised to believe in souls, gods, or any realm beyond the physical. His upbringing was rooted in science, where everything had to be explained by what could be measured. When he chose psychiatry, it was with the intention of understanding the mind from a clinical, medical, strictly tangible perspective. Then, one quiet night in hospital, something that should have been impossible appeared with ordinary calm. It was the 1970s. Greyson was young, on call, and rushing through dinner, spaghetti with tomato sauce, which he accidentally spilled on his tie. Minutes later, he was summoned urgently. A woman had arrived after a suicide attempt and was unconscious. He went to speak with her roommate, a woman named Susan, gathering what information he could about the patient's emotional state. The exchange was brief. Greyson took notes, thanked Susan, and returned to his office. The patient, deeply unconscious, showed no response. Nothing about the scene suggested that she could perceive anything around her. But the next morning, the world bent. Awake and stabilized, the patient looked directly at him and said, "I saw you last night. You were talking to Susan. You had a spaghetti stain on your tie." Greyson froze. She had been unconscious, without awareness, without the ability to see or hear. No one else knew about the stain. The conversation had taken place far from the doorway. The details were too precise to dismiss. He wondered whether it was a prank or whether Susan or a nurse had mentioned it, but the explanation did not fit. Years later, he would say, "I thought the nurses might be teasing me, but something in me knew that was not enough." So he said nothing. He did not document it or tell colleagues. He placed it mentally among those troubling facts that do not fit within one's worldview. But it stayed with him. Only years later did he find a framework that matched what he had witnessed. He came across Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody, the book that introduced the term near-death experiences. For the first time, Greyson read accounts of unconscious patients who described seeing their bodies from above or hearing conversations from down the hall. It felt like a light switching on in a dark room. He realized he was not alone. Others had encountered the same anomaly. That forgotten moment with the spaghetti-stained tie became the beginning of a career-long investigation. Greyson started to collect cases. He interviewed patients, built clinical scales, compared testimony with medical charts, and helped found the International Association for Near-Death Studies. His goal was not to validate religious belief, but to investigate a phenomenon that challenged the basic assumption that consciousness depends entirely on the brain. That first encounter did not give him answers, but it gave him a question too large to ignore. How could a clinically unconscious patient describe events she had no ability to perceive? As a scientist, you cannot ignore a phenomenon simply because you cannot explain it. That became the foundation of his approach. Science advances into uncertainty, and occasionally its path begins with something small, a stain, a comment, a contradiction that refuses to disappear. For Greyson, that night marked the moment when the boundary between life and death ceased to be theoretical. It became personal, concrete, and impossible to dismiss. As he expanded his research, Greyson found that many near-death accounts contained the same elements. People reported a sudden sense of peace, a feeling of leaving their bodies, observing medical procedures from above, passing through darkness into light, encountering deceased loved ones, or experiencing a panoramic review of their lives, reliving moments not only from their own viewpoint, but also from the emotional perspective of those they had impacted. These stories came from people of different cultures, ages, and belief systems: atheists, children, religious practitioners, people who had never heard of near-death experiences. Their reports shared structure, clarity, and emotional intensity. For many, the experience was more vivid than ordinary life. The after effects were equally striking. People often returned transformed, less afraid of death, more compassionate, less materialistic, more focused on relationships and meaning. Some changed careers. Others left behind long-held fears or grudges. Many had never considered anything spiritual before their experience, yet came back convinced that consciousness extends beyond the body. Greyson approached all of this with careful skepticism. He did not claim proof of an afterlife, nor did he accept simplistic neurological explanations. For him, the phenomenon deserved disciplined attention, not dismissal. That single moment, long ago in a hospital corridor, became the first echo of a larger mystery, an echo that shaped the research he would pursue for decades. Interviewing survivors, examining medical records, testing claims against time-stamped logs, and mapping recurring features. He could not explain how the patient saw what she saw, but he could follow where the data pointed. And that path led him into the heart of a question that science is still learning how to ask. For centuries, science has operated under a simple yet powerful assumption. The brain produces the mind. According to this materialistic view, everything we think, feel, or remember is nothing more than the result of chemical reactions and neural connections. When the brain shuts down, consciousness disappears. End of story. But what if that isn't the whole picture? Over the past few decades, this question has gained remarkable momentum, driven by research that challenges the traditional boundaries of neuroscience. And at the center of this shift stands, once again, Dr. Bruce Greyson. Across more than 40 years, Greyson has collected and analyzed hundreds of near-death experience cases. What he found would seem unthinkable to many. People reporting perceptions, thoughts, and emotions at moments when their brains were not functioning. Complex mental activity. Without an operative brain, how could such a thing be possible? One of the most intriguing theories considered by Greyson and other researchers is known as the filter, or transmission model of the brain, rather than generating consciousness, the brain may act as a kind of valve, limiting, regulating, or channeling a broader field of consciousness that exists independently of it. It's a counterintuitive idea, but far from a new one. The writer and philosopher Aldous Huxley, in his famous essay, The Doors of Perception, proposed the concept of a mind at large, a universal consciousness that the brain filters so that we can function in daily reality. Under this view, what we perceive is not the entire landscape of existence, but merely what our nervous system allows through. And when the brain shuts down, as happens during a near-death experience, that valve may open, giving access to a far more expansive state of awareness. Greyson summarizes it simply. It seems that the mind is, in some way, separate from the brain, and if that's true, then perhaps it can function when the brain dies. Although still controversial, this perspective has begun to attract attention across several scientific fields. In recent studies, such as the research led by Dr. Jimo Borjigin at the University of Michigan, scientists observed an unexpected surge of brain activity in patients at the moment of death. Rather than fading gradually, the brain appeared to ignite in a final burst, marked by an intense pattern of gamma waves, frequencies normally associated with conscious processing. Is this last surge merely a desperate hallucination produced by a dying brain? Or could it reflect something deeper, perhaps an opening to that wider field of consciousness? Greyson remains cautious. He does not claim that consciousness survives death, but he does insist that near-death experiences reveal anomalies that the traditional model struggles to explain. One of the most striking is the coherence of the reports. People describe accurate details of events occurring in the room while they were clinically dead. Others recount transformative experiences that took place during periods with no detectable brain activity. In many cases, medical staff and hospital records confirm the timing and circumstances. As Greyson puts it, as a scientist, you cannot ignore a phenomenon simply because you don't know how to explain it. This mindset has led him to collaborate with experts from a wide range of disciplines, including neurosurgeons, philosophers, and physicists. Among them is Dutch cardiologist Dr. Pim van Lommel, who also studied near-death experiences in cardiac arrest patients. Van Lommel proposes that consciousness may be non-local, not confined to the brain. In his view, the brain might function more like a receiver than a generator. Such an idea is unsettling for many scientists because it challenges the foundations of empirical methodology. If something cannot be measured, how can it be validated? Yet the mind, like consciousness itself, is not a simple equation. The fact that we do not yet understand how consciousness originates does not mean it lacks reality. Indeed, consciousness, how subjective experience arises from matter, remains one of the most profound mysteries in modern science. Greyson isn't searching for definitive answers. His aim is to open a door, to create a small crack in the wall of current knowledge through which we might glimpse what lies beyond. His research is not about religion or belief. It is about facts reported by people who have undergone profound, coherent, and extraordinary experiences in circumstances that, by traditional scientific standards, should make such experiences impossible. Perhaps consciousness is not a byproduct of neurological activity after all. Perhaps it is something that transcends the brain, something that uses the brain rather than being created by it. And if that is true, then the moment of death may not be a shutdown, but an opening, an exit, an expansion, a return. One of the most unsettling elements of near-death experiences is also one of the most intriguing: the ability of some people to describe, in striking detail, what was happening around them while they were unconscious or clinically dead. This is known as out-of-body perception, and when those details are later verified, the mystery becomes very difficult to ignore. Dr. Bruce Greyson, a central figure in this field, has devoted much of his career to investigating such testimonies. What does it mean for someone to see their own body from the outside? How can they describe conversations, objects, medical procedures, or physical details when, from a neurological point of view, they should have no perception at all? One of the most frequently cited cases is that of Al Sullivan, a patient who underwent open heart surgery in 1998. During the operation, while under full general anesthesia, Sullivan later reported that he left his body and floated near the ceiling of the operating theatre. From that vantage point, he said, he watched the surgeon gesture in frustration and noticed a logo printed on the top of a piece of equipment, something that could only be seen clearly from above. When the medical team checked his account, it matched exactly. How could he have known? Greyson classifies such testimonies as veridical out-of-body experiences, experiences in which specific details can, at least in principle, be tested against the record. To study them, he developed what is known as the VNDE scale, a clinical tool for assessing how accurate and specific patients' perceptions appear to be. When someone tells me they saw their body from an impossible position, he has said, like above the operating table, and the record confirms it, science pays attention. These reports are not isolated curiosities. Patients in emergency rooms have described watching the scene from above. Nurses running, doctors delivering shocks, defibrillator paddles slipping, objects falling to the floor. One person, on waking, correctly recounted the color of the anesthetist's gloves and repeated part of a private conversation between two surgeons. Another mentioned the number of their hospital rooms seen from an aerial angle at a time when their body was clinically dead. For science, such cases present a genuine challenge. Are they simply coincidences, products of suggestion, reconstructions built from scraps of memory and imagination? Skeptics rightly point out that not every story can be verified, and that more controlled experiments, such as placing hidden targets where they can only be seen from the ceiling, have produced mixed or inconclusive results. Greyson acknowledges this openly. Hospital settings are chaotic. They are designed to save lives, not to host perfect laboratory trials. Not every perception can be confirmed, he has said, but the consistency of the phenomenon obliges me to pay attention. What matters to him is not proving the existence of a soul or a spiritual realm. His work is not an attempt to endorse any religion. It is an attempt to follow the facts wherever they lead, facts which, if accumulated with enough rigor, may suggest that consciousness is not tied as tightly to the body as we once assumed. As he has put it, the veridical near-death experience scale does not aim to validate religions. It aims to investigate facts. Imagine this. You wake up in a hospital bed. You are alive, but you remember hovering over your own body. You remember your watch lying crooked on the bedside table, a comment between two clinicians you did not know were present, a mark on the ceiling you had never noticed. You ask questions and one by one, the details are confirmed. How would you explain it? For Greyson, the only honest answer at this stage is simple. We do not know, but we are investigating. That ongoing enquiry, open to the unexplained yet anchored in restraint, is what turns his work into a bridge between science and mystery. If consciousness can, even for a few minutes, appear to separate from the body, then we are dealing with a phenomenon that demands a new way of looking at death, at the mind, and at what it means to be human. It does not force a doctrine, it forces a question. And for a scientist like Bruce Greyson, that is exactly where real discovery begins. For decades, medicine taught that death is an event. The heart stops, the blood ceases to flow, the brain shuts down. Full stop. Yet contemporary science is beginning to show that dying is not a single instant, but a process. And in that process, at its most critical moments, there seems to be more going on than we once imagined. Dr. Bruce Greyson has followed this research closely. As a psychiatrist and scientist, he has repeatedly seen people who were declared clinically dead return with vivid, coherent memories, packed with details that appear to defy medical logic. What used to be dismissed as mere hallucination now sits under the lens of neuroscience. One of the most striking findings comes from a study led by Dr. Jimo Borjigin at the University of Michigan. In animal models and later in human patients, researchers observed that immediately after cardiac arrest, the brain does not simply fade to black. On the contrary, it enters a kind of overload. There is a surge of gamma waves, frequencies usually linked to conscious processes such as perception, memory, and self-awareness. A burst of intense synchronized activity right at the threshold of death. Borjigin put it this way: during death, there was a synchronization of gamma activity we did not expect. The brain seemed to be in a state of hyperconnectivity. What are we to make of this? For Bruce Greyson, these data do not prove that consciousness survives death, but they do undermine the notion that the brain switches off instantly like a light if brain activity can continue when the heart has stopped beating, he argues. Then we need to ask which part of us truly dies and what perhaps persists. Another study, published in Frontiers in Neuroscience, monitored the brain of a dying patient and recorded patterns similar to those seen in dreaming, deep meditation, or the vivid recall of memories. The case is limited, but it suggests that the mind does not always depart in silence. Instead, it may pass through a neurologically complex state as life draws to a close. Taken together, these discoveries open a crack in the traditional way of understanding death. It is no longer only a matter of when the heart stops, but of what the brain is doing in those final minutes, even in those last seconds. Could this intense activity be related to near-death experiences? Greyson is cautious. He does not claim that these gamma waves are responsible for tunnels, lights, or encounters with deceased relatives. But he does emphasize that the temporal overlap between clinical death and the subjective experiences reported by patients deserves attention. As a scientist, he recognizes that there are no easy answers, but he also knows he cannot simply ignore what the data begin to suggest. Skeptics maintain that this hyperactivity could be the last flicker of a collapsing nervous system with no real consciousness attached. Yet the question remains, if these brain discharges are capable of generating clear, structured perceptions, where do we draw the line between the biological process and conscious experience? The mystery deepens when another element is considered. In many of these accounts, the experience is not confined to the body. People say they separated from it, watched the scene from outside, and lived something that felt beyond the purely physiological. If the brain is generating that, it is doing so in a way that our current models do not yet explain. Some researchers, such as Dr. Pim van Lommel, have suggested that consciousness might be non-local, that is, not limited to the brain. In that view, the organ we assume produces our inner life could instead be a receiver or interface for something more extensive. So, what is it to die? Science, at least for now, tells us that it is not a simple off switch. It is a complex dance between cells, neurons, electrical patterns, energy, and perhaps something more. A moment in which the brain does not always die at once, but speaks in its own electrical language right up to the edge. Maybe a final attempt to understand, or a final act of letting go. For Bruce Greyson, exploring what happens at that fragile frontier between life and death is not only a scientific challenge, it is a human necessity, because if we can better understand that last instant, we may also learn something essential about how to live. Death is the end of everything, or so we have always assumed. For those who have lived through a near-death experience, it was not the end at all, but the beginning of a new life. And for Dr. Bruce Greyson, who has listened to and documented hundreds of these accounts, coming back to life is not only a biological event, but often a deep, complex, and unexpected transformation. Those who return from that threshold do not come back the same. They change the way they see the world, their values, their relationships, their priorities. Greyson has observed it again and again. People who once chased success, money, or recognition now place love, authenticity, and spiritual connection at the center of their lives. Many leave entire careers behind, reconcile with family members, or dedicate themselves to helping others, not out of fear, but out of clarity. One of the most consistent findings in Greyson's studies is the loss of fear of death. After experiencing what they describe as a profound peace, love, or expansion of consciousness, many witnesses say that death no longer feels like a threat. In its place, a new concern appears: not living a meaningful life. My aim is not to make you believe one thing or another, but to invite you to rethink how you live, Greyson has said more than once. He is not trying to convert anyone. He is trying to plant a question in the mind and in the heart. If death is not what it seems, what are you doing with the time you have? Yet the return is not always easy. Many people come back to a reality that no longer fits what they have lived. They try to explain the inexplicable, but words fall short. Some feel isolated, misunderstood, emotionally unmoored, as if they had returned from another world, but no longer fully belong to this one. Greyson has documented cases in which the emotional aftermath of a near-death experience includes anxiety, depression, or difficult maintaining the life that came before. Although many report profound changes, studies show that quality of life does not automatically improve. Integration is key, he explains. It is not enough simply to have come back. People need psychological support, social understanding, and a space where their story can be heard without ridicule. In some of his long-term studies, Greyson observed that lasting personal change depends on several factors: the intensity of the experience, the support network around the person, how open their environment is, and whether they find a way to reinterpret what happened. In other words, the miracle is not only returning, it is learning how to live afterwards. Science has also begun to recognize this pattern. Recent research, including studies published in Critical Care Forum, has reported that a proportion of people who undergo near-death experiences emerge with a heightened sense of purpose and stronger feelings of connection with others at the same time. These studies warn that the experiences can be disruptive if they are not integrated into everyday life. And yet, despite the difficulties, many people insist that what they lived through gave them something priceless: perspective. Life with all its problems becomes more precious. The present moment gains weight. Empathy deepens. Time is no longer merely spent, it is honored. Greyson sums it up this way: those who return do not only tell us about what might lie beyond, they teach us how to live here. That, more than anything, is the quiet revolution at the heart of his work. it is not about proving the afterlife. It is about understanding this side of life more deeply. It is about seeing how an extreme experience can reshape what we take for granted and opening a space where science, testimony, and consciousness can coexist without cancelling one another out. And so, at the end of this journey, we are left with a simple yet unsettling question. If you too came back, what would you do with your second chance? And that concludes our video. If you enjoyed the content as much as we did, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future videos. And don't forget to turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our updates. Thanks for being part of our community. See you in the next video.